they eventually it became transistors instead of gates, diodes. But by gates, I mean diodes to make the current flow. So I mean, that was good training, really was. Came in handy later. But that's how I supported myself after out of high school. I mean, out of the Army. When I was at Mars Hill, I went to work for Edwards Equipment Company in Asheville. And then after that, I went to work for a company called Cash Register Systems. It was for one thing, I did not want to go back to Washington, D.C. I wanted to stay around here. So, guy over there at Cash Register Systems, the service manager there, Dick Tankersley, hired me away from Edwards Equipment Company. He and I worked together in Washington, D.C. He was a technician up there. He knew me, and he was from over here in Bristol. So I went to work there. I was counting up on my fingers the other night. I used to tell people there was 3 people in the company. There was about 7 in our branch here in Asheville. The owner of this company was from Tennessee. He owned a company over there, one in Greenville, South Carolina. And then, so we kept expanding and had an office ended up an office down in Atlanta. I want to start this around. I warn you ladies, that's some of my Vietnam photos that Linda found. I didn't know where all this stuff was. She found all this. So I've got my shirt off in a lot of those. Looking good.
Joe, you almost skipped past that. You're a Vietnam vet. And what'd you do it in?
What did I do? Well, I repaired radios. That's what I did. That's kind of where some of that electronics came in handy there. But also I got to learn more. Anyone's familiar with electron, you got 2 different types of, let's not get into theory of flowing of electricity. The NCR taught us one way. The rest of the world is the other way. So that's what I got taught in the military, was the other way, which was nice to know that. It's you got positive flow or you got negative flow. You know, I hate electronics because that's also learned in the military was radio, frequency, RF, instead of just digital. But that's what I did there. And actually I only worked on about 3 pieces of equipment that was shot at, with bullet holes or shrapnel or whatever. Most of them weren't functioning. But that's what I did over there in Vietnam. Thank you, Patrick. I missed that. But with this company I work for, Edwards Cash Register Systems, later they changed the name to Mid-South Data, so that all the companies had the same name. All of our companies in every state that we operated out of all had the same name, Mid-South Data Systems. But when you would go to phone book or anything, you had Mid-South Florist, Mid-South Hardware. I mean, it was crazy. So they changed the name again while I worked for them to Kairos. That was hard to get used to that. And then later they changed the name again to Eugilisis, and that's what it is now. But they sold the company. When I started with them, I was telling you, I had like about 7 people in our office. Each office had about that many. And when I left the company, we had over 500 employees. It was a big deal.
And 300 of them you were responsible.
Well, yeah, they're at the last I was going to get out. Matter of fact, I quit having migraines when we bought the motel. But now one thing, since we're talking about history, while I was working for Edwards Equipment Company, I was still in college then, but the first electronic cash register, which company do you think it was that came out? I'll tell you. It was a company called R.C. Allen. Came out with the very first electronic cash register. Oh yeah, all of the companies, IBM, NCR, Sweda, Anchor, a lot of companies were working on electronics and replacing their mechanical machines because it was just more cost effective. And the boards were being made over in Japan, you know, everything, even then it was already moving out of the country. And, but RCL, and that was, matter of fact, I was working, Edwards Equipment Company was the company I was working for there. We were not just RCL, we had a lot of mechanical machines we worked on. And, but we had Anchor, Sweetus, Data Terminal. There was, you think all these independent dealers, and that might lead you to something, there's a thing called the Independent Cash Register Dealers Association. I don't know if it's still functioning or not, but that's how all these independents all over the United States kind of work together to, because NCR was not, they were not being cooperative. They wouldn't sell us parts, wouldn't sell us ink, wouldn't sell us ribbons, all kinds of things. But the attorneys with the Independent Cash Register Dealers Association, they called us second-hand dealers is what they call us. Because we were basically sometimes trading in or buying up some NCR equipment, rebuilding them and selling them. And that was my job. That's what I did. I did a lot of, matter of fact, about all I did was training. Any new hires we got, I would train them to work on some of this mechanical equipment and the electronic stuff. We did board repair. We got down to the board repair stuff, and it was changing. It was already changing rapidly. I went to Chicago about 4 years in a row. We'd go up there and have these classes, seminars and things. And one thing I learned there, in about 1985, I guess, was that even board repair or board swap is soon going to be a thing of the past. That's what this class, I can't remember what the future of your company, they'd have little titles on these little classes we had to take. But I found that most interesting that he was talking about where he was getting to the point where people were not going to even get their cash register fixed. They were just going to go toss it and go to Brindle's or, I don't think Brindle's around anymore. You'd go to Sears, Kmart and buy another cash register and hit a button, it'd be programmed and boom, they'd go, you know, with that. But the Mid-South Data and the Kairos, Eugilsis, we basically concentrated. But back in the 80s, all the restaurants you go into around Asheville would have our equipment in it. Because we had this, it worked in restaurant situations where they bring up stuff, go to the kitchen, servers could, you know, take your seat number and, you know, separate your ticket, you know, like they do now, instead of doing everything by hand. But we had all of that equipment. We even got out of that, though, concentrated just on grocery store. I worked on scales. I had to be, I had to get, what do you call it, the state would have to certify you as a scale technician. But we worked on scales and, but it was, I didn't know how fast it was going to change. That was in '85. It had, by less than 5 years, it had already happened as far as everything was. Anybody here remember when Sears used to have all those mechanical machines and they went total electronic and it was so quiet in there because they didn't have those machines making all that, well, even the grocery stores didn't have all that machine making the noise. And one thing, the reason I hated it was you can't see what's going on, you know, with a mechanical, if it's all jammed up, balled up, you could actually trace it into it, find out what's wrong with it, and fix it. With electronics, you'd swap the board out, or you knew it was a chip display or something, but we would do it, even though I hated it. And but it was getting crazy. And plus, we knew the company was getting ready to be sold.
But Joe, you forgot to tell them it was every Ingalls grocery store.
Well, yeah, all the Ingalls grocery stores. But,
Every store.
nice thing about the mechanical machines, if you had 12 lanes and one of them messed up, a big deal. They'd call you and tell it was messed up. You go the next day and take it in and fix it or fix it there. But with electronics, if one of them messed up, take down the whole system. You know, and would be called out all hours of the night. That's why some people say, how can you want to do something like your motel and have to work 24 hours a day. But I worked 24 hours a day anyway, because I had a pager, you know, and one time I was at Myrtle Beach and they called me. Lots of times you could fix it over the phone, depends on who you were talking to, you know, you could walk them through a problem. So we bought the motel. Oh, wait a minute, I should be passing some photos around here. Linda and I, when I was telling, I was telling some folks at our table up here that we want to know how we met. And usually we save the questions till the end, don't we, Carl?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so if you want to know how we met, you can ask me. But yeah, I was telling Pam that really our boys, Linda and I are a second marriage, and our boys are the ones who got us together. They had been friends since the first grade. Kindergarten. But I didn't know Linda, and then of course she moved out of town. And matter of fact, let me just pass pass those around, or look at them first, then pass them around. Linda moved back to Bent Creek area where I lived at the time, and our boys played baseball, and they introduced, I think they had a hand in it, getting us together there, and we.
No, actually said, will you go to dinner with me and my dad? I said, I can't, your dad is married. He said, my dad's not married.
Well, tell you how I proposed. I had planned to propose to Linda out there. I wasn't going to tell this part of the story, but you brought it up. We were at Marina Del Rey there in California, and Linda worked for a stock brokerage firm at the time. I was still working for Kairos or Eugilicis. I don't know whether the names kind of go together there, but I had planned, we had probably technically only been dating about 2 months at that time, even though I had known her since almost, not a year, but a good 8 months or so, because we didn't start dating when we went out to eat Mexican with, I don't think we did we? No. And, but we did, because we lived in the same neighborhood, the boys had all their friends there, and we were always hauling them around to bowling alleys and places like that. And so I got to know her very well. And but anyway, we did go on this trip because she had a convention out there at Marina Del Rey at the what's the name of that hotel? The Ritz-Carlton. There we go. And I had planned that night to ask her to be my bride, of course, but I chickened out. And it was getting to be daylight. That's how long I kept trying to figure out what, you know. And she had to go to all kinds of meetings that day, so she had to go up to her hotel room and start getting ready. So I walked up the street because I knew there was a diner up the street up there that had a pay phone. They still had pay phones back then. And that was in 92. So I called the hotel, asked for her room, and she answered the phone. And I said, Linda, will you marry me? And she said, yes. Who is this?
It's a good start.
So, then in 90...
You could tell she was desperate.
We're sitting back here with your wife.
Look at those pictures coming around from Vietnam.
Got a
I
knife.
think I was a good catch. You know.
Well, she was too.
Oh yeah, she was. Still is. And if I get emotional later, you may understand. I want to pass this. So this is just we went on vacation sometime after we were married down to I did some hang gliding. And that's just where I went up and did that was Tantum thing where they carry you up, and then this is our grandson, he got got engaged this weekend. So we had a very emotional weekend, and that's the Biltmore estate. And, yeah, we bought our motel in '94. And, so see, I've taken you all the way back to now. I guess what I might, who was it? Chuck said that some accolades of his life, or I didn't put it down that way, I put it down as like highlights made in my life. Of course, my beautiful wife Linda, you know, she's
Marta's his date tonight, however.
she keeps me on the straight and narrow, that's for sure. But one meaningful thing in my life was, of course, I was a volunteer at one time in Asheville on the suicide prevention hotline, and I'm kind of hesitant to tell. Of course, we didn't tell people when we were doing that. I did that only for about a year. But